My dear brothers and sisters in Christ, the process of faith is a gift and a task. Our hearts are restless. And the reason is because our hearts need to rest on something that gives us stability and meaning. Some call this the ultimate ground of being, or the supreme being, or simply God. Whatever name we call it, the inescapable reality is that one can find no peace and security until one finds God who gives meaning, direction, and synthesis to our lives. However, this search for God is fraught with many obstacles, as God is mystery. For some, they give up the search because of the incomprehensibility of life, and especially in the sufferings of the world, and conclude that there is no God. Nevertheless, there are still many who believe in God today, even though this faith in God is expressed in different ways. For us Christians, not only have we been given the faith to believe in God, but also the revelation of who God is. Through God's grace and revelation, it has been revealed to us through the apostles and the prophets that Jesus is the revelation of the Father, and that believing in Him, we will also share in His life and glory. Indeed, today the Scriptures want us to know that Jesus is the glory of the Father. Through Jesus, the whole earth will come to know who God really is. But the thorny question is, how does one come to embrace the faith of the apostles, since we do not have a direct knowledge of Christ? How can we come to believe in the same way that they believed? Indeed, today's feast causes us to ponder and reflect how one can grow in faith in Jesus as the Christ in the Epiphany of God. Certainly, we all wish that we have the same or even the deeper faith of the apostles. But the truth is that the depth of our faith varies according to each person. Some do not even have faith. Others have only lukewarm faith. But such faith is not sufficient to bring about a deep encounter with the mystery of life. How then can grow in faith in God as the incarnation of God, so that like the Magi, we can really surrender ourselves, our entire life, and bring in worship and in our daily life? First, one must realize that faith is primarily a gift from God. It is the way of Paul, the way of grace. It is possible that one can suddenly be graced from God with a revelation and come to find Him. Yes, there are some people who have come to experience God through attendance at one prayer meeting, or through a miracle of healing, or even an apparition. This is certainly possible. However, such immediate enlightenment in faith is rare. Even then, after such an experience, they also need to grow in faith through prayer and study. For most, however, faith is a gradual growing process. It demands our cooperation, and it comes about through our own personal search of God. This is the normal way of coming to faith. It is the way of the catechumenate. So for most of us, we begin the journey of faith like that of the Magi. First we see the star. In other words, the beginning of the journey of faith begins with a glimpse of God. It could be the result of some dissatisfaction in us, a hunger for God, a certain sense of emptiness, and a need to be satisfied. The restlessness in our hearts is the beginning of faith. It tells us that we need something more to be fulfilled in life, and that even earthly things and success somehow cannot fill that emptiness in us. It was true in the case of the Magi. They saw the star rising, and that led them to the search for the infant king of the Jews. This step of searching is what we call the step of inquiry in the RCIA. It is a period when one asks many questions about life, God, and sufferings. So we begin the search by inquiring. Like the Magi, we feel the need to check up. We must dare to inquire about what is happening within us and outside us. Quite often, people say that faith is given to someone and not to all. This is not quite correct. Faith is given to all. The problem is that many are not attentive enough to the prompting of the Spirit. Instead of listening to their restlessness and their lack of wholesomeness, many suppress His voice instead by distracting themselves with other things. Indeed, if you find ourselves seeking for a deeper meaning in life, a more lasting peace and happiness or meaning, then it means that the Spirit is prompting us in our hearts to search for the truth. Like the Magi, therefore, we must be courageous enough to search. Of course, the search can be quite daunting. Where and who to search? We can be quite sure that these were the same fears that confronted the Magi. They too did not know where to begin, but they began anyway from the place where they saw the star. And so they traveled to east with the just and guidance of one star. We too must travel deeper into our interior being so that we can feel and understand the depth of our heart and ask searching questions about life, death, meaning, and happiness. Only then can we fill it with God's presence and love. But how can this be done? Like the Magi, the search for God must begin with consultation of the religious leaders and competent authorities. So for the Magi, it was only logical of them to consult the political and religious leaders of Israel to help them locate the infant king of the Jews. For the inquiries growing in faith presupposes that we come to learn from Christians or from priests and religious to help them to gain a deeper insight into the faith. Here again, the problem with many of our Catholics is that they do not seek to grow in understanding of their faith. We only need to ask ourselves, what is the percentage of our Catholics that go for upgrading courses in their faith? Nevertheless, while religious leaders can help us to grow in faith, ultimately in the encounter with the God is a personal event. Our friends and religious leaders can help us to come to know God, but in the final analysis, one must take the leap of faith in relating with Jesus. That is why, after seeking advice from Herod and his courts, the Magi went again on their way seeking for the infant king. This means that no one can give us a personal relationship with Jesus. It must be our own choice, free will, and desire that make such a relationship possible. The problem with Herod and with many of us is that we cannot be bothered to make the personal search ourselves. We want to know God through secondary sources. If Herod never came to find Christ, it was because he relied only on the words of his adversaries but never personally. The fact of life is that we cannot experience for another person. Without a personal search, one cannot find God. This is where the journey of faith becomes difficult for many. In this journey, we cannot but meet with many difficulties. King Herod was really troubled when confronted with a possible contender to his throne. He was frightened and fearful. Already in his mind, he was scheming to get rid of his future competitor. We too will feel disturbed at the kind of life we are living, or others in the Christian community are living, a life that is not faithful to the gospel values. Quite often, like Herod and his courts, the problems and scandals in the community arise, including some of the religious leaders, can prevent people from coming to faith. At other times, we seem more confused than ever about life, as no answer seems to satisfy us. Whatever it is today, we are called to be like the Magi who remained undaunted in spite of the difficulties. Because of their belief and faith, their efforts were not in vain. They came to find Jesus ultimately. Yes, so long as we have given our best, then we can depend on God's grace to help us. Like the Magi, we will soon find the star once again when we come out of our dark tunnel. In the reappearances of the star is a stark reminder to us all not to give up hope, but to persist in the grace of God. The consequences of finding the star, of finding Christ, is of course one of great delight and joy. In finding Christ, we will find great joy, for we come to realize the true meaning of life. That is why the Magi, upon finding Jesus, bowed down in worship, for they had encountered Jesus, the infant King and God in person. In presenting the infant Jesus with all the gifts befitting a king and priest, they expressed their total surrender to one who had revealed to them the real meaning of life. Indeed, it is true for those who have found Christ. Before we came to know Christ, we were anxious about our future, about our career, our worldly success and health. But for those of us who have found Christ and tasted the great joy of love and peace in service and prayer, we regard all such things as unimportant in themselves unless they can help us to serve others better. The result is a new and transformed life. Yes, we are told that the Magi, after worshipping Jesus, returned to their own country by a different way. We who have come to know Jesus will return home by a different way too. That is to say, we will see a change of lifestyle in us. We will never be the same again. We will have a new life in Christ. This life is now lived fully, for we have come to realize that real meaning is found only when one is in a deep union with the God and our fellow human beings in love and service. However, the journey of faith continues. This journey is not confined to inquiries or catechumens only. It is for everyone. All of us must grow and deepen our faith each day. There is no graduation in terms of faith. The graduation can come about only when we die and enjoy the beatific vision of God. Until then, the life of faith for everyone, including us priests, is a long life process, as God is fathomless and inexhaustible, and life is full of novelties and unpredictability. But the gift of faith is that more we come to know God, the more we come to find life, both in this world and the next. Yes, to the extent we deepen our faith, to the extent we become more liberated, enlightened, and filled with the God's love, life, and joy. God bless you.